Hey there, Danielle Matthews here. I am coming to you live from Florida. Today is Monday. It's book club day, and we are going to be discussing chapter 3 in Loyalty to Your Soul. So if you are joining me live, let me know that you are here. If you are coming in for the replay, let me know that you're catching the replay. It's always nice to know who's here, who's enjoying this, who's reading the book along with us. The conversation is really about, well, the heart of spiritual psychology. And this particular chapter was fabulous. I don't know if you all can relate to this, but I know I can in my life. When I go after goals, when I go and try to achieve something and I get it, let's say I earn a certain amount of money, or I have bought a car, or I've done something, it's like that high of reaching the goal, it lasts, and it's it feels wonderful, but it's short-lived. Do you ever notice how it's there for a minute, and then, maybe a day later, a week later, a month later, it's the shininess has worn off, and all of a sudden you're back to feeling how you were. And what I want to share with you is that is normal. When we hit goals in this physical world, they aren't going to fill that space, that emptiness that is in all of us. And that piece gets filled by the second half of life. And so many people are focused on this physical reality and what we can go create in the external world. But the second half of the equation is your inner world, right? There's polarity to everything. So when there's outer, there's inner. And your inner world, learning to have spiritual evolution, is what it's really all about. And so in this chapter was called Life is for Learning. I love it. Hey, Tina, thank you for letting me know that you're here. This is what it kicks off with. I love the quote. It said, "We're all learning to use the external world as a feedback mechanism to guide us into the sacred." How beautiful is that? So using everything that happens in this physical world as a feedback mechanism, as a learning opportunity. Hey, Karen. As a learning opportunity for us to be able to be going, as he says, guiding us into the sacred. For me, that's the internal world, right? That's the spiritual evolution that we talk about. And I just thought that was so beautiful. So if we take time, he says, to learn about the dimension within which we want to progress, this inward inquiry is rendered more and more difficult, unfortunately, in our modern world because of all of the instant gratification, sound bites, all the superficiality that we're involved with. And life, hey Lou, and life seems to prioritize these external goals, right? The society prioritizes and kind of shines light on, and you get rewarded for what you do in the external world. And so it can be harder and harder to make the time for this internal growth. But I promise you, that's where the magic is. That's where true happiness lies. It's the other part of the equation. It's why when you hit the external goal, it feels short-lived, and all of a sudden, something else needs to come in. You need something else. That wasn't enough. That wasn't it. You need more. Constantly searching, going for that in the external world. That's the reason you keep having to perpetually do that, is because it's not actually going to ever scratch the itch. All right? You have to do that through the internal. Okay, so he says, for people consciously interested in spiritual progression, there are two distinctly different contexts and skills we have to consider. One for spiritual reality and the other for physical world reality. I thought it was very helpful. I've never heard anything sort of flushed out the way that he did, but I think he did a good job. So he says, okay, understand that Earth is basically school and that your life is filled with lessons. He says it's essential that you work within the context of the physical world reality in which you find yourself. That's why we're here, In this regard, learning how to use everyday experience as the grist, I guess, for your spiritual mill is fundamental. Within a spiritual context, every thought and action is filled with spiritual opportunity. I just loved that. I tell my students all the time, use life to help you grow. Every trigger that happens externally, what do I always say? The trigger is the teacher. It's a lesson. It's a learning moment. All right, so he has this visual, right, of the goal line of life, which I think all of us are very accustomed to. All right, we have these negative experiences, positive experiences. We're trying to move more and more, have success in the physical material world, right? We're looking for things. He says success is usually defined for moving from negative experiences toward more positive ones. Gains on the goal line, I think we can all agree with this, are measured usually in financial units, or tangible things like a relationship or health or our creative expression. And because of the nature of the physical world, movement on the goal line is external. It's happening out there. It's your ability to create and do and make things happen external to you. This is the success I'd say all of us know about, right? You with me? Like high five me, 5 in the chat if you're with me. Like, yeah, makes sense. I understand how to achieve in the physical world. I understand what that looks like. And I love how he says, to the casual observer, a casual observer would easily conclude that such achievements represent the highest form of human fulfillment, right? People might say, okay, once you become a millionaire, like you've made it. That is the highest form of human achievement. But something inside of us goes, no, that's not quite right, right? I've seen millionaires, billionaires be unhappy. Like, okay, so that's not quite right, but it is what society keeps telling us. And so you kind of have to go, okay, well, what's really happening here? And he says, there's nothing could be further from the truth than saying that, hey, when you fill these things on the goal line, then you've made it in life. He says, everything that you acquire in this material world will need to be maintained. So just because you hit a certain level in your company, a rank in your company, or you get a promotion, okay, now you're there, there's more responsibilities, there's new things, you have to maintain it. You got your car, you got your house, well, now you got to maintain it. You have the relationship, you have kids, great, well, now you need to maintain it. Okay, so there's a maintenance that has to happen alongside of all of this. He also says you cannot create beyond what's permitted by your spiritual curriculum. I don't know about you, but that one hit me like between the eyes. Did any of this hit you guys like that? I read that and I went, wait a second. So because of what my spirit came here to learn, there are going to be certain limitations that don't make any sense. They're in my way, roadblocks. And it makes sense to me because I have coached over the last decade, I have coached hundreds of people in business. And I have watched some people have like almost effortless success. And I've watched other people try incredibly hard and not really get anywhere. And I've always wondered, like, what is that about? And then I saw this and I said, oh, that's probably what it's about. He says, you cannot create beyond what's permitted by your spiritual curriculum. So you might not be having the successes and creating what you're wanting because there's a lesson you're supposed to be learning. And until you learn the lesson, you're not allowed to go to the next level. Okay? I thought that was really fascinating. He also said, when you are done creating, you will not be any happier than when you started. I think that's true. Like I said, you get the relationship, okay, for a minute, it's like, oh, the world's the best. And then all of a sudden, you're back to you because you're still living with yourself. That internal world, like we talked about, right? There's the external and then there's the internal. And if you don't also work on the internal, the external stuff's not going to stick. It's not going to stay. You're not going to have the happiness you're looking for. Hey, Charlotte. All right, in order to awaken to your next step spiritually, you must be willing to surrender anything you've previously created. That is also wild. You got to let go. You got to know when you just go, okay, this served me, and now I'm letting go of this to let the next move in. That's hard to do. I know for me, I was forced into it. After my car accident, I was forced to have to let go of the reality I had created, which was, in my opinion then, like the best reality ever. I was snowboarding every weekend. I was working during the week in a place where like I was making a big difference in the lives of the kids I was working with. It was fantastic. It was the dream, living where I wanted to live. And I had to let go of all of that for this new path to open. Fascinating, right? So he says, true happiness is not to be found along the goal line. While you can experience temporary highs, you can never discover who you are, your purpose in life, and how you can make a meaningful contribution in your world through success on the goal line. You just can't find it. Like I said, that's all external stuff. It has nothing to do with the inner dimension. And that's why so many people fall short. And that's why, people reach a certain height and then they're like, well, I can't go any further. And like, I still feel unsatisfied. Why? Because of the internal side, because of the spiritual dimension of life. Okay, so he says, he calls this life's learning line. So the goal line is moving in the physical world, and then there's a learning line, and I love this. He says this is about spiritual evolution. This is the inner stuff. A completely different context of reality or roadmap is required for this because the nature of this terrain can only be referenced experientially and doesn't lend itself to external measures. Right? You can't measure someone's spiritual growth by how much money they have, right? It just doesn't work that way. Because spiritual evolution happens within, it's composed of inner experiences and does not readily become observable externally. There's no direct correlation between spiritual growth and gains on the goal line. There's just not. And he kind of has this, for those that maybe don't have the book and didn't see it, this is what it looks like. This is the learning line, this is the goal line. And I kind of wrote there, it's a different dimension. So we're moving from like this just going this way, right, to all of a sudden now we have another dimension, we can move up. And that dimension is the learning line. It's spiritual evolution. And he says the learning line of life is the degree to which you are learning to be more loving and compassionate. His whole thing is that we need to know our loving nature. The divine nature is this, it's like the sky, all allowing, non-judgmental, unconditional, just loving presence. That's who you are. And the more and more you get access to that is growth on the learning line. And he used this to sort of inform the fifth principle. So the fifth principle of this is physical world reality exists for the purpose of spiritual evolution. I agree with that statement so wholeheartedly. It is what I teach all the time. It's like at the essence and core of everything that I teach. Physical world reality exists for the purpose of spiritual evolution. You are here to evolve, right? We all know about evolution, and evolution for a long time in this world was around, physical changes. Now what's happening? It is spiritual evolution. It's internal shifts and changes, learning to connect into your intuition, direct knowing, something that is beyond the 5 physical senses that see this physical world, but the 6th sense, right, that we all have. Okay? If I were to ask you, why do you think you are here? What would you say? And if you ask the average person that question, like, okay, we're all here, we're on this planet very clearly, and why are you here? What's the purpose of this life? After my head trauma, I sat in a dark room for a long time, and I contemplated things like this, like, well, what is the purpose of all of this? If I can't go do all the things I used to do, like, why am I here? And I questioned, like, should I even stay here? Like, what is the point of being here if I can't go do things in the external world? Can I read that line one more time? I can. Physical world reality exists for the purpose of spiritual evolution. And so if I were to ask you, well, why are you here? I would say the typical thing people would say, and I would say this for a long time, this is why I studied biology, because I thought I need to learn about this physical world. But he says the typical person says, the physical world is a planet called Earth, one of billions that exists in physical reality, which is the only reality there is. Our job is to study the Earth scientifically and gain control over the forces of nature. At best, life is a struggle, and the goal is to survive, right? Survival of the fittest. And be as successful as we can be. The more successful we are, the better. Interesting. And I would have said for a long time, yeah, that's what I thought until my car accident. I thought, yeah, it's just about like understanding this physical world, studying it, and then doing your best, to achieve in it. And that's what it was all about. Yeah, that all came crashing down after I could not do anything in the physical world for 2 years. And then it was like, well, what is the purpose and who am I and all of this stuff, right? This for me was my spiritual awakening. And I love what he says after this. I'm on page 45 for those of you that want to follow along. He says, however, from the vantage point of the learning line, right, spiritual evolution, from souls come to Earth to learn. And there appear to be many different classrooms going on simultaneously. If you look around the world and you look, there are war zones, there is starvation, there's incredible wealth, there's creativity of all sorts of kinds, there's like farming and people learning about like the physical world in that way. There's so many classrooms, if you will, going on simultaneously. And he says, some are learning how to fulfill basic survival needs. Well, guess what? They chose a life where what they need is to learn how to survive. The basics of survival. That's why some places on this planet, right, those things are still the number one. Third world countries. Okay? While others are learning about families, right? Some people are having big families or having different family dynamics, or they're learning about being left by a loved one, or, what it looks like to lose and grieve a loved one, what true love really looks like. Others are learning about boundaries, others, responsibilities, others, communities, and so much more. Some are learning about creative expression. Some are learning about service. Some are learning about altruism. This is the soul's learning. This is why the dynamics are in someone's life the way that they are, because what they're proposing is that the soul chose this particular life, the circumstances they were going to grow in order to be put into the external situation where they had to learn, they had to grow, they had to figure out these lessons. All right. And there are those souls who are contemplating everything this particular learning opportunity has to offer. You might even say they are graduating. They've grown beyond the apparent dualities of right and wrong and are centered in a place of acceptance, loving, and compassion. There is nothing more for them to learn here. My spiritual teacher, I would say, is that way. We just celebrated his 93rd birthday this weekend, and he's able to drop into this loving, accepting presence, like at will, and do it in a way that it like causes everybody else to drop into the same space. It's incredible. Is his soul coming here again? I don't know. I've talked to him about it before, and I'm like, I highly doubt it. I think he learned some massive lessons in this life, and I think he's maybe graduating. So he shared in here in this book. I like this chapter. He gave several like different stories, and one of them was that he was walking with his spiritual teacher, and he saw a handicapped man, and that was just like really physically disabled. I think he was in a wheelchair, and he felt sorry for him. And his spiritual teacher was walking next to him and was like, what's going on? Why are you feeling bad for this? Like, you're looking at only the physical world. You're looking at the physical reality, and you're saying to yourself, I wouldn't want to be limited like that. Wow, that's such a difficult life. He said, she said to him, but you're not seeing the spiritual curriculum for that soul. That soul is ready to graduate. That soul's last lesson is to have to learn to be and endure this physical disability in this life. And if they're able to do that, they graduate from all the lessons here on earth. Super interesting, right? So all of a sudden his perception changed, where it's like, wow, like maybe I don't really see what's going on. Like there is a deeper layer to everything that's going on. And there totally, I've lived it in my own life. And I would say, if you look back at your life, you've lived it too. That some of the most difficult things led to the most beauty, led to the deepest relationships, the deepest insights, right? It's like these struggles in the external world are the learning moments. They're the opportunities that we're all having, the difficult relationships, the dynamics with family, all of that. Part of your soul's learning, okay? So, seen from within the spiritual context, you observe that all of life's experiences are part of each soul's unique curriculum. I just love that. It's wise to approach physical world reality with a healthy respect and learning orientation, regardless of how any particular situation may appear. Okay, so you can ask yourself things like, all right, if this dynamic is coming into my life, if this, obstacle, challenge, whatever it is, if it's coming into my life, well, it's coming for a reason. My soul is supposed to be learning a lesson. This is the gift from the divine. This is where I'm supposed to be having the most internal insight and growth. I have to pull something else out from inside of me. Does that make sense? Like if you put that lens and perspective over top of all of your challenges, all of a sudden you're not going to be like, oh, why is life so hard? It's like, ooh, what am I about to jump into? How am I about to grow? How am I about to learn? What am I supposed to be learning? And you start to ask different questions and you get very different answers. You start to see life in a very different way. Okay. And I loved, did you guys catch this? So how do you know if you're doing well with your spiritual curriculum? This was like thrown in here and I thought, oh, that was a nice little nugget. So how do you know if you're doing well with this with the spiritual curriculum? With the physical one, we know you can measure it in, your financials, relationships, whatever, all that stuff. But what about in the spiritual world? Anybody remember? So he says, think about the last challenging situation that you had, okay, whatever the last dynamic with a loved one or at work or whatever. How did you handle it compared to how you would have in the past? And he said, if you handled it with more love and more compassion for yourself and others, then you're growing on this learning line. Your spiritual evolution is increasing. That's how you know. You look at how you're handling challenging situations. If you're doing it with love and compassion, then that is the growth on the spiritual line that we're talking about. Okay, I just loved that. All right, so from within a spiritual context, you will see that Earth is perfect just the way it is. It's a magnificent learning environment for spiritual evolution, providing countless situations and circumstances that are perfect learning opportunities. Look at life that way. Stop saying life is hard, life is difficult, why can't life be easy? No, you are here for the challenges, for all of these different learning opportunities. Every single conversation you have is a learning opportunity if you choose to look at it that way. All right. He says there are no mistakes and no failures in spirit. No matter if you look back at your life and you go, geez, I regret that. That was the wrong choice. I handled that incorrectly. It's like, no, absolutely not. And stop beating yourself up and let it go. Release it. Surrender to it. What he says is there are only an infinite number of ongoing learning opportunities. You just learn. You just learn from it and you move on. That's the whole point. It's the whole point. Okay? Yes. Tina says, yes, I'm growing. Yes, exactly. When we know what it's supposed to look like, we can see. And you for sure are. I've watched it. I've had a front row seat to your growing. All right. Gains on the learning line are precisely what you take with you when you pass from this world and are precisely what's meant by spiritual evolution. I loved that. So people always say, well, you can't take anything with you after this life. Well, they're talking about the physical world. Yeah, you can't take your house. You can't take your money. Your bank account's going to go to somebody else. So's the house. So's everything. What do you take with you? The lessons your soul has learned and mastered. So the more difficult and challenging this life is, if you create that mastery, if you allow yourself to learn, think about the momentum that your soul has because of this life and the abilities that are now built into you because you've been able to grow in this way. You've expanded your circle of serenity, as I call it, right? Of course, he says it's up to each person which line you choose to spend the bulk of your time pursuing. All right, and where do you spend the bulk of your time pursuing? It's a good reflection. Do I spend the bulk of my time trying to create in the external world, or do I spend the bulk of my time in this inner spiritual world? He says, one's not, it's both. You should be having a balance, right? It's not like you're supposed to just be doing one and not the other. There's a polarity in life. We need to, yes, do things in the external world, try to create, but also use it for the spiritual evolution. So if it's not happening, well, you surrender the outcome. You surrender what's going on. You use that for the spiritual lesson. Does that make sense? Oops, I lost this. Okay. He says the challenges on the goal line are recognized and properly utilized as opportunities and even blessings on the learning line. This is how you create the balance between the two. Okay? When you realize, you're in this world, you're not of it, but you're trying to create in it. Okay? So this week, what I would suggest, he says, as souls, we are aware that we're all here fulfilling a spiritual purpose, or we wouldn't be here at all, right? You're all here for a reason. He says the opportunity is to discover how to use the goal line as a jumping off place for gains on the learning line, rather than only for goal line gains as ends in and of themselves. I loved this. And I've said to a lot of people, for those that don't know, I have grown a network marketing business in ASEA for 10 years. And I absolutely love that industry and that model, having to create your own business, requiring you to step out and do things differently and create all of these different dynamics, different conversations every day, all of this. I've said since day one, that has been part of my spiritual growth, my spiritual evolution. It's my classroom. That business has been. And yes, it's led to success in the physical world because great, if you're pursuing something, I think ultimately you're going to have success in the physical world. There's just going to be. But the evolution that has happened, the inner shift that has happened is phenomenal. The person I was 10 years ago looks nothing like the person I am today. And it's not all of that is monetary. I could be earning way more than I do in that business, but it's the gains I've gotten are these inner gains. And to me, that's way more important. And what I want all of you to do is look at, okay, how can I use what I'm doing in the physical world to help me grow spiritually? Am I in a difficult relationship? How can I use that dynamic to help me with my spiritual growth? Now, I'm not at all suggesting you stay in a toxic place, but it's like you're being put into a psychic pose, like you're getting held in a relationship. You've dedicated to being with one another so that you're there through the rough time. So if you're in a rough time, it's like, all right, what am I supposed to be learning? How can I grow here? What do I have to let go of? What do I need to bring in? All of these things. Okay. Your business. Many of you also have business. Use your business in that way. Use your business to help you grow on a spiritual level. Use your work. Use the dynamics with your coworkers and your boss. These are all, again, it's kind of like a relationship, like you're boxed in. You have to deal with these people. Unless you want to make a big change, like you're in a situation that it's like, okay, there's no like getting out of it. So I've got to work on my inner reactions. Does this make sense? The rest of the chapter was him sharing a story about how he was using just his life to help with his spiritual growth. And his example was he had a big plot of land and he was looking for water. It's very expensive to dig a well. And so he was told by a local that there was like this guy who did this woo-woo stuff and could figure out where water was. It's called dowsing. And like part of his practical mind was like, that's ridiculous, but then there was like this curiosity inside of him. And he's like, well, if I believe in, the spiritual side of life, then this makes sense what this guy is doing. So anyway, he says, well, I need to lean into that. So he used his life for the spiritual evolution. And all of a sudden, he builds this beautiful relationship with this man who, by all sort of on the goal line, right? He's like very poor, has like nothing, but the man's incredibly happy. And the man's very connected with his intuition. And he's able, because of that, to be connected with the earth. He's able to find where the water is, all of these things. It's a beautiful story. And, I think that what Holly, who is the guy, has to offer, he offered some insights. It was on page 55 that I just loved because eventually, right, this guy is like, well, Holly, can you teach me this? And like, I want to evolve this sense and all of this stuff. And he was getting frustrated, right, because he wasn't doing it perfectly and he wasn't, getting it all right. And Holly's like, I've been doing this for 40 years. I don't always get it right. Like there's, you got to give yourself grace. But I loved this. And it leads to principle 6. So page 55, guys, it's like the middle of the top. He says, because he's like talking about how frustrated he is and whatnot. And he says, what's most valuable in life isn't measurable. I love this. He says, what's most valuable in life isn't measurable. How do you measure the quality of the experience we're having when we're out here dowsing? Right? Is it really, so what he's saying is, is it really about you being able to most precisely find the water? Or is it about the process of you learning how to connect in and how to quiet your mind and how to be still and how to, and us to have this connection in this relationship? Like, can you really measure that? Is it really about finding the water, or is it about this other thing that's not measurable? He says, how do you measure the beauty of a sunset? What a beautiful question. Like, you can't. You can even try and capture it on your phone, on video, but it's not measurable. He says, and even if you come up with a way, will your measurements add up to the experience of watching one? How it feels in your soul, in your spirit, in your heart to watch a sunset. I got to watch one the other day on the water, and it was just like, wow. Like, just wow. Like, you just don't have words. Just wow. If you spend less time measuring and more time appreciating, you'll be much better off in the long run. What wise words from this man, right? He says, again, I'm going to read that. If you spend less time measuring and more time appreciating, you'll be much better off in the long run. My spiritual teacher says all the time, you need to be grateful for what you have. Stop asking for more. Stop asking for all this stuff to be created in your life. Just be grateful for what you have. And I think he's saying the same thing here. He's saying, look, stop trying to measure everything. All right? Spend less time on, well, I need this thing, this whatever, and appreciate what you do have. Take more time appreciating who is in your life, what has happened, because there's some version of you 5 years ago that was asking for the life you have now. That's the truth. That is the truth. Okay? So principle 6, spiritual evolution or growth is a process. It's not an event. This is what I tell everyone I coach. I say, look, you're telling me, you want to grow this business, you want to hit X rank, you want to do X thing, get X income. That's great. You need to fall in love with the process, because when you reach that destination, that's not what it's about. It's not what it's all cracked up to be. The best part is who you're becoming in the process. The people you're meeting, the circumstances that you'll find yourself in, the conversations you're going to have, the ways you're going to be pushed to grow. That's really what it's about. Okay, and that's the most important thing. So the spiritual lessons, all right? So in just wrapping this up right at the end of time here, and I'm on the last page, so we'll wrap up with this. He says, I came to understand how a person can be happy with relatively little in the way of material possessions. So he's talking about Holly. I learned how to be in the woods and appreciate nature in ways I never could have imagined from my New York upbringing. And I experienced continual pleasure and amazement while learning new things like dowsing for lawnmower malfunctions. Most of all, I was able to grasp the importance of maintaining an open mind and cultivating a willingness to surrender old ways of thinking and being in the world. We have to surrender that sometimes. I learned how essential it is to be willing to let go of anything I think I know in service to discovering something I don't know. Even the possibility of becoming aware of new senses like my ability to douse. Which leads to principle 7. All life is for learning. All right. And he had some really great sentence starters. We don't have time to get into it today, but I'll just leave you with that. In my life, the goal line includes what? What are you doing in the physical world? In my life, the learning line includes what? What are you doing for spiritual evolution? In my physical world reality, if physical world reality exists for the purpose of spiritual evolution, then what does that mean for you? If all of life is for learning, then what does that mean? If the end game isn't success on the goal line, then what is the end game? An opportunity for me on the learning line is what? Okay, so all of those are fabulous reflections. I hope that you sit and you do them. We'll move into chapter 4 next week. Chapter 4 is a big one. And so what I'm thinking is we'll stop on page 69 right before it says the emotional realm. Okay, so we'll read page 59 to 69. I think 10 pages is enough. These are dense, right? This is deep stuff. So do those sentence starters, fill them out, really sit and reflect with this stuff, right, guys? It's not just about hearing it once. It's about really looking at this, and it needs to change you. That's the whole point. All right, so have a beautiful week. This is a great start to the week, and I'll see you next week.